So now let's talk about parsing and programming. So all parsing is the ability for your code to be able to read text and be able to pull out information that you care about. So the reason that you use a format style such as XML or JSON is that it makes parsing very easy, right? So with XML, extensible markup language, you use tags to basically say what type of information is between those tags. So in order to parse, you can tell your code, look for these tags, give me the information in between those tags, and that's the information that I care about. As I showed you with JSON, JavaScript object notation, all that is basically you get the response back from the API, you get that one variable value back that has multiple values at different indexes. So what you can do is you can say the variable with the index name, give me this information. So if I want the city that I'm in, if I go to that geographic API that I showed you, I can simply say response at index city. It gives me the city that I'm in. If we did the cat facts API, so response with fact, that gives me a fact about a cat, right? That is a very easy way to be able to parse text. The issue that you run into in the real world, though, is not everything is, XML and JSON. Sometimes you're dealing with what is called unstructured text. And all we're talking about with unstructured text is that the text is not categorized in some way for it to be very easy to read. So what you have to do as a programmer is you have to look for things that are unique about the information that you're trying to pull out of a document or out of text so that you can just get the specific information that you care about. Just to give you an example of how parsing works, I have a little script on my computer to show me the IP address for CNN.com. So let's say for some reason I want the IP address for CNN.com. What I'm going to do is I create a script that pings CNN.com. I get the response back, and then I go through a couple of steps just so I can get that IP address. Again, even if you don't fully understand everything that I'm showing you, that's completely fine. I just want to give you an idea of what this process can look like. So here's a basic Python script. If you don't fully understand it, that's okay. We have a full series on Python. If you really want to learn how this works, this will just give you an example of what parsing looks like when you're actually writing some code. So here, we're going to use something called the OS module. So this allows us to interact with the underlying operating system using Python. And so we're going to send a command to the operating system. So we're going to ping for a count of 1 CNN.com. So we're going to ping CNN.com once. And then the value that we want to deal with is going to be text. So we're going to turn this into text, and we're going to assign that to response. So basically, we're going to ping CNN.com once. We're going to get the value as text back, and then here we're going to print out that response. So when I run this, we can then see what that response looks like. So ping CNN.com, parenthesis 151.101.67.5, right? That's the IP address, and then a whole bunch of different information here. But here's the thing. What if all I want is that IP address? So I want to take that IP address, I want to put it in a database. Let's say I'm having issues with connectivity to a software as a service provider, and I think it might be because of a specific server they're sending us to. So maybe there's a cluster of servers, and it seems like, we might be getting redirected to one particular server that's having a problem. So what I want to do is I want to ping every once in a while to see where I'm directed to, put all of that into a database, and then be able to analyze and take a look at that later. So I want to basically be able to save that type of information. So that's where here I can go through and I can actually try to parse the response out. Right? So, okay, so what we're going to do here is we have that response. So now what I want to do is I'm going to split the response into what's called a list in the Python world. So wherever there's a next line character, I want to turn that into a value in the list. So this will be a value, 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 and this will be a value. Right? So it's going to be able to, those will all be values, and then what we're going to do is we're going to step through each of those values. So we're going to say for a line in response, so for each one of those lines, if there's a parenthesis in the line, right? So let's take a look at these lines, right? So only one line has parentheses in it. So this is the only line I want to deal with because I just want that IP address. So if there's a parenthesis in the line, then what I'm going to do is line equals line dot split based off of the spaces. So line now is going to be a list. So ping will be at an index, cnn.com will be at an index, the IP address will be at an index, 56 will be at an index, data will be at an index, and bytes will be at an index. Then for value in line, so I'm going to step through each of these values, right? If there's a parenthesis in the value, so no, 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 no. So this is the only value that has parentheses. Basically, I'm going to grab that, right? Value equals value.strip. So I just want the IP address. So I want to delete the parenthesis and the colon, and I want to delete the other parenthesis. That is what I'm doing here. So I'm stripping those out, and then I get to print the value on the screen. So now if I run this, right, I will then only get the IP address. And so that is how I was able to parse a ping response to give me only the IP address, and that gives you a very basic idea of how parsing works in the coding world. Now, before I get any crap from the old timers that are watching these videos for some reason, and you're like, Eli, that's not a very good way to get the IP address. You could have used regex. Yeah, look, old timers hate regex. Everybody hates regex. I am not getting into regex on an introduction to programming class. If you have no idea what regex is, feel good. That's probably a good thing. Regex is a way that you can go into text and again, be able to pull out a specific value. It is probably a better way than what I showed you, but what I showed you kind of goes through the steps so you can get an idea of how, again, you can parse some text. As with many things in the programming world, there's a dozen different ways to solve the exact same problem. Depending on your skill level and depending on exactly what you're trying to accomplish, you will use different ways. And so just to be clear, regex is a way you can do it, but oh golly, these students, right? They have enough to deal with right now. They don't need to deal with regex. So anyways, that's all there really is to parsing. Parsing is just the ability to go through the text and to be able to pull out information. And this is why being able to have a standardized format for information and data is so important, right? If everything is standardized, then you can just pull from a specific index or you can pull from a specific tag, and then you can go on your way. Right? If it is unformatted text, that can just be a bear for trying to go through and get the specific information you're trying to get. It's interesting, I had a friend of mine years ago, and he was trying to basically parse health record type information from all the counties in the United States. And the hardest part for him was not parsing one particular document, right? If you gave him the information from a county, he could go through and he could parse that. The issue was every county in the United States formats the information in a different way. And so what took him 5 minutes of coding, for one county, you start trying to figure out how many counties there are in the United States and, the rest of it and the different versions, of formatting they've had over the years. And that became a complete and utter disaster. And so that's one of the things you need to be thinking about too when you're programming is not just simply how you're going to be interacting with the data or how your users are going to be interacting with the data, but you should think about the future. Like if somebody in the future creates an application that's going to be interacting with what you created, will your output be designed in such a way that it's easy for whatever it is to understand what the output looks like? This may be an intern coder that just wants to create some kind of dashboard, like maybe collect information from what you've created to create a dashboard so people know what's going on, right? Will it be relatively easy for them to be able to pull out the information they care about? Or in the modern world of artificial intelligence, the more logical your formatting is, the easier it will be for AI to be able to pull out the information that it cares about to be able to do something with it. Again, we talk about things like agentic AI, which again is its own class, but basically they're AI agents. So you use AI to actually perform tasks. Well, remember, artificial intelligence isn't actually artificial intelligence. It's just simply statistical analysis at a scale that the human brain cannot conceive, right? But it's basically just statistical stuff, right? So the more understandable you make your output, the easier it will be for that statistical analysis to be able to figure out what the hell it's looking at and hopefully provide something that's useful to the end user. So one of the things you have to be thinking about with parsing is it's not just simply about your ability to parse somebody else's information, but it's also when you create outputs, how easy is it for somebody else to be able to parse what you're outputting. But that's basically the idea. All parsing is for your script or for the computer program to be able to read text and pull out the information that you care about.